2. Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. We are looking forward to getting out to the Emerald City this week. Luke Jones is on the backfields out in Owings Mills, getting you ready. Any breaking news will happen first on the WNST Tech Service. It's all brought to you by our friends at Coons Ford Security Boulevard. Dennis taking a bye week this week. I am waving bye-bye after what I am hoping is a victorious trip out to the Emerald City. This guy does radio on the Seattle Seahawks radio network, a friend of a friend of a friend and a football player. And as Brian Billick, my partner in crime here on behalf of the Living Classrooms, would say, well, he's a Stanford guy, so you know he's a smart guy. We welcome Dave Wyman onto the program from Seattle, 2 years into doing the games. But, man, you've been calling the Seahawks thing during a pretty glorious era, right? The action green era of Pete Carroll that lives on. We're going to see a hellstorm when we get up there this time, aren't we?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the weather up here. A lot of times, it's unpredictable. But, it's been a very glorious run, I'll tell you. And as a matter of fact, I forgot to mention to you before, I just finished a book. I co-authored a book with Bob Condota, who's a beat writer up here for the Seattle Times. And it's called If These Walls Could Talk. And it's, probably 85% about the Pete Carroll era, because I've been doing pre- and post-game radio since 2004, and then, Pete came here in 10 and 11, and John Schneider came in, and it's been, the book's mostly about that, but it's just been a very interesting run over the last few years. John Schneider, Pete Carroll have just done a great job, had some interesting personalities up here during that time, and won a lot of football games.
Well, let's start at the top, right? I mean, Earl Thomas is coming back. That's a BFD, right? I mean, in your town, and we've had a couple of these. I mean, Terrell Suggs came back here and played football 4 weeks ago, which we never thought he'd leave, right? And Joe Flacco's running around out in Denver, and we're watching that right now. Eric Weddle wound up here on a second run. Now he's having a third run. Not unusual, but then it begs the question, like, why didn't he stay? I mean, of all the guys that Richard Sherman left a little earlier, but Russell Wilson's still there doing it. Pete Carroll's still there doing it. What happened with Earl?
Yeah, it's a good question. They're reticent to do the third contract for guys getting into their 30s. And, they ended up doing the right thing because Earl broke his leg in Game 4 last year and then left the field, flipping the bird to the sidelines. So whether it was Pete Carroll, he said it was for Pete Carroll. I don't know if John Schneider maybe was supposed to be the beneficiary of that middle finger, but yeah, and he had said before that he wasn't going to practice if he had a headache or a sore toe because they hadn't extended his contract. It was the last year of his contract. And Seahawks ended up being right because he ended up, breaking his leg. And so, but him, Richard Sherman, Michael Bennett, I mean, those guys all kind of left unhappy, and they took shots at Pete on the way out, whether it was flipping the middle finger or saying, that Pete's message is stale. Michael Bennett said something about reading books during his meetings and things like that. So it didn't end very well for a few players here. And, they were just very outspoken types. Earl's a different cat, man. That kid can play. He's one of those players that I've always said, if you have the game taped, you got to run it back to see how the hell did he get there? How did he get there so fast? I mean, he's lined up 17 yards deep. All of a sudden, he's on the line of scrimmage. So, wonderful player. But, he just wasn't happy here, and they were ready to move on. And, they decided the guys that they were going to pay and the ones that they weren't. And those guys all were not on the list.
Dave, you've been at this a long time. I mean, playing the game back in your era and seeing, the fan base grow there. And I've talked to so many of the Bob Condota types this week about, the Mariners and Edgar Martinez. And, I'm going to see a Who concert in a baseball stadium. My wife thinks it's cool because I did a baseball tour a couple years ago. She didn't get to go to the baseball stadium. So it's going to be a hell of a weekend. Husky Stadium, we got Oregon coming in and all this stuff. But the triangle of having a general manager, having a coach, and having a quarterback. And, everything here has been built off the Ozzie Newsome and Billick Harbaugh and then the Joe Flacco and Ray Lewis, obviously having transcendent players, and John Ogden and having several of those players. But where you are right now, Pete survived, right? John Schneider, those are the Village geniuses, and you got a quarterback that a lot of other people have doubted on and hated on, and he maybe doesn't get off the bus looking the right way or whatever it is. You don't like the offense. You liked it better when they were pinballing and running the football back in the Legion of Boom, and the defense had to complement that. But now he's on an MVP trajectory, and it's starting to look like you might only be on the early part of the middle of his career. You know what I mean? He might be special 10 more years there. And there's a sea of green, and you've built something there that quite frankly wasn't there back when you wore the helmet, right?
Absolutely. We had a couple of good runs, and then there was the Holmgren era, of course, 2004 and 5, go to the Super Bowl and, lose to Pittsburgh. But, yeah, bringing...
Got cheated by Pittsburgh. Remember, I'm in Baltimore. They cheated you there. Remember that.
Yeah. People still talk about that and don't like the Steelers.
I bet they do.
Don't like the officials.
Every time the Steelers win, we talk about it in Baltimore, not in good ways.
Yeah, getting back to Russell, he really is underappreciated. I would ask you, how he's viewed from the other side of the country, because we always feel like nationally he just doesn't get the respect. But, one of the things my radio partner, Steve Rabel, during the games, who's a Seahawk legend and been doing it since I played, we talk about how every game, before the game, you look at the stats, there's some ridiculous stat on Russell Wilson that compares him with Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Tom Brady. I mean, he's in those conversations with, and this last week, it was his 30th fourth quarter or overtime comeback win. I mean, he's just the numbers that he has, and right now he has no interceptions. He's incredibly efficient. He's the most efficient quarterback in the league. And I think our stat last week in Cleveland was that he's averaged 100 quarterback rating on the road. And he had 114 quarterback rating the other day in Cleveland. So doesn't throw picks, doesn't control, he can't control the yards. He can't control the number of times that they're going to throw. Last year they were dead last, 27 attempts. And, I think he had 6 or 7 interceptions last year. A few years ago, he led the league in touchdowns, so it's just, but yet I honestly believe this, Nestor. I believe that people discount him because of his height still. I think if he's 6'3", everybody would be talking about him like he's Peyton Manning and Tom
Drew
Brady.
Brees would have that too, right? I mean, and Doug Flutie would have that to some degree, just the fact that he ever did it, right? It is fascinating. You can still get off the bus not looking right, because certainly Lamar gets off the bus and you say, wide receiver, maybe a safety, certainly not built like 6'6" Ben Roethlisberger, but the skill set on the edge, and if you don't have a guy to set an edge, they're going to make you pay. And I really remember this pretty vividly. I got trapped in the San Francisco airport one morning flying somewhere. I don't even know where the hell I was flying. And the only game was a Seattle Seahawks Carolina Panther game. It was early in his rookie year, going back to maybe 2012. And I was pinched between flying to Denver. I was flying somewhere. I don't know where it was. And I sat and watched him play in a game I wasn't interested in the game. It was early on, and I'm like, wow, that kid can play. And all these years later, it still doesn't look right because it doesn't look 6'5", it doesn't look drop back. Imagine for us last year watching Lamar Jackson, even last week, run into linebackers. That's just not something we're used to watching Joe Flacco for a decade here. It doesn't pass the eyeball test, but when you see what it does to defenses, and if you have a good defense, and when you can put a drive together like the Ravens did the other day against Cincinnati, these 10, 12 play, 8, 9, 10-minute drives, and pull the air out of the football, when you can do that at will, you control everything, and especially if you have a defense, and Pete's putting the defense back together, right?
Well, they're trying. They got a great deal with Clowney. I know there's some rumbling here because he has 1 sack. He has an interception. He's drawn about 4 holding penalties. So, they got him in a really good deal. John Schneider basically is paying him $5 million this year because he got the Houston Texans in the trade to pony up about $10 million of it. And then they traded away a guy who was going to make 4. So you kind of net out that way. It was a really good move by him. So you got him. You got, of course, Bobby Wagner, who, I'm not sure how he's viewed nationally, but I think pretty well. I mean, everybody knows that Bobby Wagner is, always going to be one of the top tacklers in the league. And he had a game last year where he forced a fumble. He had a sack. He recovered a fumble, and he had a 98-yard interception returned for a touchdown,
That's
along
all.
with about 12 tackles. Yeah, so
That's Ray Lewisy, right? Ray did that stuff in 97,
exactly.
98, 99. Nobody saw it, and then all of a sudden he's in the Super Bowl and he's Ray Lewis. It does take you playing late into January to, again, in the case of Russ Wilson, to say, yeah, he's the real thing, right? Like they did it once but that was about Marshawn, and especially for Pete, sticking around and doing this again. Pete still feels like he's 18. I looked him up, right? He's pushing 70. It's incredible, right?
He's amazing. I mean, the amount of energy that he has. And I was standing by the buses in Cleveland, and he came out and was talking to me and our sideline reporter and, the GM, John Schneider, and his wife. And he said, congratulations to all of us. I'm like, Pete, I didn't do anything, man. I just stood there and watched the game and called it. But, like, he's just always positive, and, like, what you see on the sidelines is that's who he is all the time. So, and same with Russell Wilson. They're for real. I mean, that's their personalities. And I think the combination of Pete and Russell and all the positivity, I think that finally this team is Russell's team because it reflects him. The way they're winning right now, they're overcoming adversity early on. The first couple drives in that Los Angeles Ram game on Thursday night looked like a jailbreak. It was horrible, and it looked like they drove down, got 2 early field goals, and it just looked like it was going to be a long day. But same thing in Pittsburgh. The first half, Russ got sacked 4 times, and he was getting pounded, and yet they just were able to come back. And so I think that just reflects Russell's personality. And, there were some misgivings with those guys like Earl and, a little bit with Doug Baldwin and a little bit with, certainly a lot with Richard Sherman, that they thought they were the leaders. They didn't really, buy into the Russell Wilson thing. There was some talk that, he's a phony and this is not the person that he really is. And yet he has just had a consistent character of, overcoming adversity, not letting anything bother him. Go look at the NFC Championship game from 2000. Well, that would be the 14 season, but it was 2015 where he throws 4 interceptions to the same, and basically the same receiver. Jermaine Kearse was part of 3 or 4 of them. And then he ends up throwing Jermaine Kearse an overtime bomb to win and go to the Super Bowl. So he just never gets down. And now finally this team is reflecting his personality.
Joe Flacco would say to me, like after they won the Super Bowl, after 5 tries and they finally win, he said, we do a lot of winning around here, man. Look up the record. We win a lot of games around here. And he wins a lot of football games, and I do go back to that crazy game in 2012 because I sort of always love, I'm a 5'9.5" guy, right? So I always like those guys when they can do, and he caught my eye right away. So you ask about what people think of him. I tell you what people think of him. We have to get on the plane and go out and play him. It's the first time in 8 years, and 8 years ago, it wasn't him, right? I mean, 8 years ago, I'm trying to think of who the quarterback was in 2000.
It was Tavares Jackson.
It was Tavares Jackson, right?
Yeah.
And it was 3 other guys you'd never heard of, right, at the time.
Right.
And we went through that period here, when there was Kyle Bowler and all that. When you get your guy and, no, we don't want to get on a plane and see Russell. I don't think anybody wants to come to Seattle and have to play Russell Wilson. And part of that, I think, always was the kind of offense it was. And that's kind of what the Ravens are hoping, that Lamar does that in the way that maybe Deshaun Watson, that these new RPO where the quarterback isn't just going to threaten the run, he's really going to run and going to do it so well that you're going to have to figure it out, that more defenses are onto that, and certainly Pete has been practicing that a long time, right? I mean, that the Seahawks would be a little bit more built to deal with Lamar than what we see in other weeks where they're not used to it.
Well, yeah, they've got some speed. And by the way, when I was playing in 1989, we went out and played Philadelphia, and I was charged because I had some speed early in my career. I was the spy guy for Randall Cunningham, and I can tell you, Nestor,
good luck with that.
I'm still looking for him. I still haven't caught him yet because that just doesn't work, But for a guy like Lamar Jackson, he's very special. You got to account for that guy. I'm looking at his numbers, 460 yards rushing. Holy smokes. So, but I'll tell you what, Bobby Wagner can run. He still can. I know he's getting into his 30s now, but he's a guy that if you ask everybody on the team who's the best athlete, who do you think might be the fastest guy? Of course, Tyler Lockett's name's in there, but a lot of people will say Bobby. he can still run. So you have to have, Lamar Jackson, and, I see his completion percentage is 65%, which is good. So, it's not like this guy's just going to beat you with his legs. So their defense, but they do have some speed. They got Michael Kendricks. They leave linebackers on the field a lot. About 80% of the time, they're in regular personnel, 4 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers. They're not subbing out guys for nickel, but I have a feeling that's going to change. I'm really interested to see what the Seahawks are going to do defensively for a guy like Lamar Jackson, because he's a lot like Russell. I call those kinds of guys, they're an extra meeting guy. He's a guy that during the week you have to have an extra meeting for. Like, how are we going to stop this guy? He's a problem. So, yeah, I'll be very interested to see, what they're going to do defensively against the Ravens.
And that's exactly what they said the night they drafted him and traded up and got the extra year and knew they had Flacco and knew there'd be free, all of that. They were, if this guy can throw the football better at this level, he's really going to cause linebackers, which is what you did for a living, keeping them up late at night all week. They're going to need all that coffee out there in Seattle, right?
That's right. Yep. So he's, like I said, he's a headache, and and I'm not sure how much worry there is out there about Lamar Jackson's health. That's the one thing I'd say about Russell too. He has never missed. I think he's missed like 1 or 2 snaps, and then there's been some times where there's a kneel down or whatever in garbage time. But he's never missed a practice. He's incredibly durable, and if you look at some of the hits he took, in 2016. And Ndamukong Suh stomped on his ankle, and it turned in a way where I'm like, that's a blown ankle. And he was fine. He came back in. Same later that year, he had a linebacker tackle him from behind and kind of fold his knee, and nothing there. He took a huge shot in the NFC Championship game that I referenced earlier from Clay Matthews. And Matthews was actually penalized, and it looked like a concussion waiting to happen, and it didn't. It never affected him. He's just incredibly well built. He's a tough guy. They worry about, you worry about him running and the read option and everything. You don't want to see him. He takes a lot of sacks, but he is just incredibly durable. It might be the best thing about him is that the kid never gets hurt. So, and I know that's a concern for quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson and Russell Wilson that are taking off running quite a bit.
Man, the other night I saw Phillip Rivers hadn't missed a game in 14 years. It's crazy, right? I don't know why that's not talked about more like Cal Ripken. We all remember Brett Favre, but Phillip Rivers doing that right now. It's crazy.
Especially in football, and that's the thing for me. I played 9 years in the league. I had 3 seasons that weren't interrupted by some kind of an injury. So, it's just so hard to stay healthy. And I always admire that. We were just in Cleveland. I saw that Joe Thomas, they have a number up. It was like 10,364 straight snaps, before his career ended. And it's just amazing to me. The durability thing, I think, is it's one of the most important things. Like coaches always say, that's the most important ability is durability, availability, all those things. But man, when you're playing this game and how rough it is and how big and fast and how hard these guys hit, it's always a marvel to me that there are guys that are able to string together that many. What is Phillip Rivers up over 200 starts or something like that?
It's insane. Dave Wyman joining us here from the Seahawks radio team. All right, now we get to the fun part of the program where, I think we're going to go to the Who concert in the baseball ballpark Saturday. So I need give me a little Seattle primer, right? You're a Reno kid and Palo Alto, and you get drafted into this thing, and you spent time in Denver as well. Give me a little Seattle. Why do you love Seattle? What should I love about Seattle? Been to Seattle many times, and I'm looking for something, that's not like the Met Grill or someplace I've been going before,
Well, there's a pretty good restaurant up here called John Howie. It's over on the east side. It's the most delicious food that I've ever had. John Howie's a guy that's been a local guy that supported the Sonics. We're still trying to bring the Sonics back up here. And so, I'd say that's a good place to eat. Go down to the Mopop Museum down at Seattle Center. That's Paul Allen, Lake Paul Allen's gig. It's a pop culture museum. Has a lot to do with some of the things. Kind of like I just came back from Cleveland, went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Kind of that kind of a tour. That'd be a good thing to hit. Definitely. Get little John Howie. Get yourself a cheeseburger there, maybe a steak, and Maybe go up in the Space Needle.
Yeah, I'm staying a couple blocks away from the Needle. I've been up in the Needle before. I mean, I've been to Seattle probably, half dozen times. But the Mopop thing, I've actually been in that square and didn't know what that was. Now that I've Googled it, Hendrix, Bo Diddley, Bob Dylan, you've hooked me up, dude. Thank you. See, this is why you ask people who know. You find Stanford guys and you get answers, right, Dave?
I get a lot of heat for that Stanford thing. When I was playing in the NFL, like everybody would always, well, go ask Wyman, he went to Stanford. I'm like, hey, man, I don't know how to do your taxes, okay? I didn't take that class at Stanford. So.
Well, Billick coached there, and, the Cory Booker thing. Messina and Jack McDowell in the early days would always wax about Stanford. Justin Armour was our wide receiver here for a little while. So, I got some Palo Alto roots out there. So, much love to all the Cardinals. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate the Seattle tips. And Husky Stadium on a Saturday afternoon. How am I blowing this, Dave, right? Like, that's the greatest experience of all time, and I'm missing that, right?
Oh, that's too bad. And I'll tell you what, with Oregon coming to town, I mean, that's a nasty little rivalry those two schools have. The fans just hate each other. So, yeah, that'll be a good one to watch, and it'll be a good game, too.
Good weekend, and I checked the forecast, 55 and rainy. Perfect for me, Dave.
That's Seattle, baby. You're getting the whole thing.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you.
All right, Nestor.
Steak and a burger, and he's sending me over for some the Mopop Museum. All right, good work, Dave Wyman. Appreciate Dave. He's not on Twitter. He's one of the wise guys out there, and he's a part of the 710 crew and ESPN at Bob, Dave, and more. You can check out them at mynorthwest.com, and you can check out Dave as well, Dave Wyman, former football player. I'm reading off the wiki here. Linebacker, 9 seasons with Seattle and Denver. Doing the Seahawks radio thing, but doing that for over 15 years now, too, in the broadcast. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio of all 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Luke's on the backfields out Knowings Mills all week long. I'm wearing my Hammer and Nails shirt on the video cam. That's out Knowings Mills as well. Strategic Factory, our great friends, creating my Baltimore positive masterpieces as well. We're going to have some new swag here on the backside of the bye week. Bye week around here means Baltimore positive. You are going to hear some of the best conversations of my career, important conversations about making the city better. It is Baltimore positive week beginning, well, not immediately following the game on Sunday, but sometime on Tuesday. Baltimore positive is going to take over Baltimore for the Nationals World Series run. I have to clear my throat for that. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, our morning newspaper delivered, powered up by our friends at Planet Fitness. You can sign up and get the morning newspaper at 7 a.m. I am inking a blog about how all of the Ravens kickoff guys should come out with Lombardi Trophy. That's and I'm going to be more inspired by the 12th man in Seattle to see that happen on Sunday, and we'll talk more about that as well. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 at WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.